Hello, 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 hello. Da-da-dam. Give us a second. Oh, hi, Green Baller. Da-da-dam. I love to see people trickle in to the Q&A as fast as possible in that way. Hello, everyone. Usually like to call people out and say hello to them. But people come in very fast right now. So my name is Yobar, Isukatu, Green Baller, Halometrics, Tipster Guy, Perucci, Zybe Crypto, Tony Gregs, Alex. Then, of course, the little kitty that we're going to talk to, Artie, Keith, JD, LU, Chulos, Arens, Van, Num, Zai, Shadow Ghost, Euphoria, Freedom Frog, Douglas, Kenneth. Lovely to see you. Kenneth wants to speak right now. Okay, no. So, let me bring you up on stage.
Hello,
there.
hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you get it's a bit background noise, but you still sound clear to me. To the audience, how does John sound to you?
Testing, testing. Does it sound better?
It sounds better. It sounds better. Yeah. You had some fanny. Sorry, some fan. This is going off to a good start, right? Some fan-like noise in the background.
Nice.
But now it's fixed. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's 5 a.m. here, so I'll be off to an early start.
Okay, I just wanted to ask: did you just wake up, or are you still awake?
I'm awake. I was up like half an hour ago, so this call an early night, and yeah, fresh and ready.
Dang, that's the hustler mindset, right?
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Let's just wait for a couple more people to come in. We already have like a sounds like he's forced to speak. Are you forced to speak? Is someone sitting behind you with a gun? Is it Mad Hatter probably?
No, it's probably not Matt Hatter. Maybe it's Alex. Kidding.
So I would say, I mean, people come trickling in. Let's get this started right away.
Yeah, sure.
So let me just check for a second if our recording bot is in here. Yep. It's a bit hard to miss when so many people are in. But yeah, hello everyone. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the Pillars. We are a community-led space aimed at supporting protocols and educating our investors for intelligent, meaningful conversation. Here we ask the tough questions you all want answered. Now let me introduce to you, as you can see on the stage, we have Joyala, also known as John, the cute kitty here up on stage. He is the founder of KERC, K-E-R-C, as you can see. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, the introductions and all of that, of course, we also wanted to say we have a whopping $350 of giveaway happening today, $100 in BUSD, and as an extra sponsored giveaway from KERC themselves, another $250 worth of KERC token once they have launched, which also will be given away, of course, when you launch. But we will find out who is the giveaway winners today. I'm not sure how we're going to do the giveaway today, like as per usual, but I also would suggest people to come in and ask some questions in the stage questions channel that is right above the Q&A stage. We always love to see you guys interact and ask some engaging questions. Also makes Mad Hatter's job easier today if you can just rip off your questions. But anyway, so as I said, KERC. You guys probably have already heard of KERC. If you haven't heard of KERC, KERC is a very, very interesting token. It is not the usual token where it's just like, invest and then you get some back, Ponzinomics, yada, 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 yada. It is something that we don't, I mean, personally, I don't think I have seen it. And I think you also are the first, is the combination of DeFi and the healthcare industry. This sounds very, very interesting. Because it's like, how would you find the connection between those two, DeFi and healthcare industry, and in what kind of like dimensions it's taking place? That was interesting when we first came across with you. Of course, also through your Bonks' video that you guys have done. Awesome video, by the way, your Bonks. Also helped us a bit for the preparation here as well, but no. Anyways, also guys, also check that video out. It's a very good video. But anyways, so KERC. I mean, it's pronounced KERC, right? You would say it's KERC, not K.
Yeah, it's
KERC.
I think KERC is easier, or you use the whole aberration of KERC. Anything's fine.
No, I think KERC is KERC is decent, but yeah, it stands for Krypto ERC, and it is, as I said, like it's trying to connect these the primary and health alternative healthcare industry with cryptocurrency, and that is that's working through that idea that basically we have pre-sale launch of the crypto ERC token, which is then, of course, with a maximum raise of $2.5 million at the pre-sale. What is then going to happen is that this native token, you as an investor are able to stake, but how? Where's the revenue coming in? That's the question. That's, of course, through the healthcare industry. And that is very, very intricate. And that's where I want to stop rambling, and I want to let you guys get into it. And I want to open up the stage for you, Mad Hatter and John. I hope everyone enjoys. Please ask some questions, and I hope I didn't bore you with my intro. But anyways, I hope everyone enjoys. Take care.
Thanks. Thank you, man.
Thank you, David. John, how are you? Other than being perhaps a little sleepy, and thank you very much for getting up so early to speak to us. How are you?
I'm good. It's quite normal for me, especially I guess because I'm working around like worldwide. So waking up at this hour is no longer like a weird thing to me.
So you're getting used to it, right? You're so slowly acclimatizing.
Yeah, definitely, because I also have sort of a subsidiary company in Canada as well, so I'm very used to like the 12-hour flip. It's just that, so I normally find my rest window around the 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. window, so it flips. The time just shifts in a sense, but I'm good. I'm fresh and we're ready to go.
Well, I appreciate the hustle and the grind. This is going to be a really interesting conversation for me because obviously you are an expert in your field, you know what you're doing in the medical field, and the knowledge that I have is going to be significantly limited in comparison to yourself. So to find some meaningful questions, I thought was going to be a fun challenge, and it certainly proved so. Before we get into what KERC is, what you guys are trying to do, I'm really curious just to get a little bit of a background on where you've come from and how you found yourself, milling around the DeFi space. And why you then decided to kind of move into the DeFi space with a project.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So I'm basically like everyone, I guess, in a sense. We're just fans of innovation and just fans of like the whole DeFi space and what basically cryptocurrency or Web3 or however we want to call it sort of can bring. I think we're more excited about the innovation that it can bring along with it. And being a heavy investor myself, like I don't know if you're in multiple of all the older projects, you would definitely see me as a mutual server and stuff like that. Like I think very, very early on already, I was sort of like dabbling into sort of like trading and stuff like that. But I think it peaked with everyone else during like the Time Wonderland season. and good memories. So that is when like I really sort of like degen in as well. I saw the potential of the space. I saw the innovation of the space, and that's where my Web3 sort of journey began. But personally, we started this healthcare journey through medical tourism. So there's where our background sort of came from. We started this whole journey about 9 years ago. So it's been nearly a decade of me being in the whole healthcare industry. We started medical tourism years ago. We started doing clients from the US, from China, basically all the way out to Southeast Asia as an option. For them to sort of seek alternative healthcare, because the prices in the States are just mad in a sense, and overseas as well. So from there we started to grow, and at the peak of basically COVID, we needed to pivot because obviously no one could fly in that season. And from that, we sort of got the opportunity to manage healthcare assets, and we got an opportunity to start managing different tiers of healthcare facilities, and that's been about 2-3 years now from that experience. And from there, and my love of DeFi, I sort of like, hey, look, I like basically we were having a conversation, me and Snocky Pie, our main developer. I'm not sure if some of you guys know him. We decided to say like, hey, look, like we were sick of the rugs in the space. We're sick of projects basically not able to bring utility to the DeFi space. And we decided like, hey, look, how can we sort of like create a project that sort of can push this industry forward? And I basically threw this idea to him, like say, hey, look, I'm doing this in terms of primary healthcare in a sense. Why don't I bridge this across? And basically we start snowballing from there, and I think this was about like 4, 5, 6 months ago, and that's where we started from.
Great, thank you. I think your background in the kind of healthcare tourism or medical tourism side of things is interesting, and we'll get into that a little deeper in a bit. But you've used the word optimization in the conversations that I've heard you, and I find it fascinating because I assume a lot of the fact that you can optimize things comes from just understanding, the price impact of what people pay in certain countries and where they can get things cheap, and how you can really utilize and leverage that to your favor with what you guys are doing now, right? In terms of the primary health.
Yeah, for sure. I think the point of optimization comes on how much you are paying in the States or any other country versus what you can get in, I would say, developed countries or developing countries, or however you want to put it. Because the issue is that a lot of healthcare costs in the US is sort of governed by the insurance policies or whatever sort of like states you're in. And what we've realized doing healthcare in Canada and US as well is that the price of healthcare in the States is nearly up to maybe even 10 times what you would get in other countries. So for example, a full screening, I'm just talking about health screening. Let's not even go into like any treatment and stuff like that, because that sort of shoots the bill up significantly. So if we're just talking about like healthcare screenings, and maybe you're about 50 years old and you need the full thing, you need the angiogram, you need the MRI and stuff like that, the health check basically. The same thing you would pay for in the States, in probably like Southeast Asia, you're looking at nearly 10 times the cost. So with that arbitrage, we're sort of able to provide executives and basically private insurance players opportunity to include in your business class flights, your hotels, your stay. It's sort of like a full board experience with your healthcare screening alone. Then if you want treatment down the road, is there where we can sort of assist you and sort of help you grow in that experience as well.
It's a very smart approach because by making it an overall experience, by putting people up in hotels, flights, making the checkup or whatever it might be that they're paying for as, for lack of a better term, fun or enjoyable as possible, I should say, start to really pique people's interest and really start to guide them towards where you can not only enjoy yourself, it doesn't have to be a scary experience, but you're also going to save a ton of money. You mentioned COVID kind of disrupted what you guys were doing a bit, so you had to maneuver in a different direction. Can you expand a little bit about what you guys are doing now with the proprietary healthcare and how you're approaching, how your business model approaches that at the minute?
Yeah, sure. Happy to share that. So, obviously, we were doing about 600 Chinese patients a year, about 300 American patients a year during the whole thing, and we were sort of expanding and we were growing in size. And COVID just hit, and basically everyone sort of came to a halt. And that is where we sort of were able to use our experience and expertise, and were given an opportunity with the Malaysian government to sort of handle the COVID session. So obviously we started off with the COVID screening section, because through medical tourism, we had such a vast array of basically dabbling into the whole journey of healthcare as a patient, because we needed to understand what was needed, what was required, and how to handle a patient. So with that experience, we had a lot of touch points with a lot of people. That means not only the healthcare segment, and also the other side, the hospital, the hotels, the catering, the service people, basically, in that sense. Mm-hmm. So with that experience, we were able to jump into the array of doing COVID screenings. That was the forefront, because the hospitals couldn't handle it in that time. This was before self-test was available, so it was a mess. Like that season was a mess for everyone. And basically we decided, like, hey, look, no one could do anything. Let's pivot all our manpower and our staff into doing screenings, because we were in touch with a lot of primary healthcare providers as well, and they're like, look, we're out of a job right now, like, is there anything you can offer me? Like, oh, we can do. So we went into the COVID screening segment. We did a couple of 100,000 people. I think it was about 400,000 or 500,000 COVID screenings at that point first. And then when we grew in terms of that size, the government moved into the whole COVID administrating component, and then they're like opening up tenders to people who basically sort of handle it, and we basically put our name in the hat, and we were awarded it, and that's where we started to manage a few mega, what they call is PPVs in a sense. The acronym stands for Mega Vaccine Centers. So that's where we sort of moved into, and in that array at the same time, because a lot of the PEs and VEs and basically funds were sort of not doing well at the same time, because the whole world came to a stop. So healthcare was sort of like the hot thing in a sense. Like, I'm sure everyone saw glove prices or so like rocket and shot up at that time. So they were basically saying, look, here's some funds as well. Can you sort of like manage healthcare assets as well? And at the same time, we got the other side of the story, where primary care doctors and facilities were suffering at the same time, because they didn't know how to navigate this whole season. And I like, look, can you sort of like help us manage our portfolios and stuff like that? So this is where we sort of got exposure to that about 3 years ago, and we've managed to create a system where it's turnkey, where as long as you can offer us your assets, we can basically manage it and turnkey around and optimize it up immediately, because a lot of these facilities and assets are actually still very traditional. Like, you'd be surprised how many healthcare assets still use pen and paper, like complete pen and paper to this day. So it's quite crazy. So we are able to sort of turnkey that, bring everything into the Web2 world, digitize everything. And this is where we sort of grew our portfolio and realized, hey, look, we have a niche, we have a skill, we've built a team that can sort of do this in a very quick and fast manner. And this is where our turnkey experience sort of comes from.
Now, one of the things that I'm going to try and do, because I've heard you talk about your secret sauce, is I'm going to do my best to prize it out. I suspect you're not going to give up much of the juicy details. One of the things I have picked up on when you've spoken is this optimization, and the fact that a lot of the people that you're looking at and the people that run their businesses are not catching up with technology faster. How much of that plays a part in what you're looking at when you're assessing businesses? Because my assumption is that the way you're tackling particular processes, you want to find businesses that, of course, are profitable, but the value lies in where and how much you can optimize their process, I would assume. So you're looking at a surgery, a group of surgeries, and saying to yourself, right, I think we can optimize this by, say, 50, 60%. Is how much of a factor is that in your decision making when you are looking at the people that you might be buying from?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. Obviously, I think the easiest way to weed out those differences is that assets that sort of optimize themselves would price themselves higher. Because I'm just jumping ahead of myself in a sense. I'm sure this is a question down the road. We do have some assets under our personal ownership on top of what we manage as well. So when they are sort of like innovative, it's like looking at like real estate as well. The moment someone sort of like renovates their house and sort of like does it up, puts a few bells and whistles in, they sort of want to price it higher. But that doesn't mean it's priced higher, so it should be priced higher as well. So obviously we have sort of like a checklist system where we have built over our experience of acquiring healthcare assets and managing healthcare assets to sort of say, okay, look, during that merger and acquisitions process, like, look, this is not where it should be priced on, or this is not where you should be at, even though you put in these bells and whistles, because yeah, you could put in something that would sort of like put yourself in an innovative category, but if it's not utilized well, it serves no purpose at the same time. So I guess that's sort of like the easy definition to weed out what is expensive and what is cheap at the same time, because at the end of the day, in that negotiation process, we sort of are able to assess. Because once you start seeing under the engine of someone's car, in a sense, you sort of realize, okay, look, what is undervalued and what is overvalued. So I guess that is a very easy tell sign.
One of the questions I do have down the line, because I'm going to circle back to the beginning and how COVID kind of impacted, what you guys were doing. But one of the questions I am going to have down the line is what happens when people start to look under the hood of your car and start to realize that you are going to be able to provide so much more value when they sell it. So therefore, they're pricing it higher purely based on the fact that you're interested. As your reputation grows and it starts to precede you, I imagine that's a factor that might come into play. And I'll ask you to think about that question and perhaps how you guys are going to mitigate against that potential problem. But in the meantime, obviously, COVID disrupted everything. One of the things that you guys say is that healthcare, for the most part, is a recession-proof model, right? It's a recession-proof industry. What did you take away from your learnings during the COVID period that you really could dial into, right? Actually, this is where it's mostly recession-proof. This is perhaps where it really struggles. And this is the area that we can operate in to really maximize our returns.
Yeah, great question. So I would say the key thing is that a lot of business owners in the primary care assets field are not necessarily, I would say, innovative in that sense, because primary care and wellness care is very traditional in its sense, and it's not something, in terms of the earnings, are not something that is very, I would say, sexy in a sense, with inverted commas. It's not something that brings in millions. It's not. It's something that is good and sustainable, because at the end of the day, no matter what you do, before you even go to a hospital or before you go into any, I would say, more specific specialist care, you still need your primary care recommendation, or you still need sort of like a letter from your primary care doctor to sort of move you in that direction to sort of do your insurance premiums and stuff like that. So that's the whole healthcare process, just in case people don't know. I'm very certain this is sort of like the natural course in every single country, because it sort of helps triage the whole healthcare journey as a whole. Because the issue is that when you sort of like have a pain, or you have sort of like an issue, you don't really know what is the major or how minor that pain could be. So this is where primary care assets sort of helps bridge you towards different tiers of care you need very immediately, before everyone just goes rushing into the emergency department of a hospital, and just clogs up the whole space. So with that experience of how primary care is sort of the necessary requirements and the need and the growing demand for that, we decided, like, hey, look, why don't we take up all these assets during the whole COVID season? And with that whole component of being able to help them move to a more optimized manner, we realized that we have a knack for this.
Yes. Your business model at the moment is very successful. Bonks did a very lengthy video on you, and as David said, it's a great video. I urge people to go and watch that one as well. And he was staggered by the numbers. So you guys are obviously doing something right. It then begs the question, why would you want to come towards, outside of your love for the space, why would you want to choose to come towards a highly speculative area and an experimental space if your current real world business is doing so well? What are the benefits here that are outweighing the negatives that have forced you into this area?
I think the key drive in this department would be my love for DeFi and Web3, basically, because the healthcare industry, in terms of technology, is always going to be far slower than the I would say the innovative market, because the issue with healthcare is that it's a very personal care field, so they don't like to change too much, because the moment you change something, it affects a lot of things down the road. It's a very sort of like fine-tuned system, and a lot of them, I'm not talking about doctors and caregivers. They don't like to change the system because they're very used to a system and don't break the wheel that is already working in that sense. But at the same time, the whole healthcare field is very ripe for change, and I'm very certain people also would like to enjoy that benefits. But the next tier you're going to have, the next problem you're going to have is you're going to have the blockage on the, I would say, the governmental level or the people who sort of governs the place, because when you start talking about like personal care data, you start talking about the PDPA laws, you start talking about the HIPAA compliant issues and stuff like that. For people who don't know, these are basically sort of governing bodies that sort of gate the healthcare industry. So I believe that the whole Web3 space is the future in terms of how we're going to handle our own data and our own I would say money as well. Decentralized care of your own information is what I think everyone wants. And in terms of healthcare, I think this is where the direction we are definitely heading towards down the road. A lot of people have sort of said like, oh, this is what we want to do. But I think once you start doing it at scale, you start realizing there's a lot of pushback, because the primary care or the secondary care or the tertiary care providers don't necessarily want to give you or change into that manner, because you're talking about patient records that span years per patient, and one patient's record is like a thick book. So to move that into the whole Web3 component is a big undertaking to sort of like move that in, and they don't really have the time, or they don't really want to. But for us, when we own the healthcare assets and we own the primary care assets, it's very easy for us to move our customers into that direction and offer that as an option. And as we grow and more adoption comes into place, it's easy to move the whole industry as well. And so this is not only a project where it comes from a point where I'm saying, look, I could have done this in a traditional world, but I'm saying, hey, look, I see a big vision in terms of healthcare and the whole decentralized space and smart contract space. I want to move the whole healthcare industry there. So I think starting a project to sort of move us in that direction is a great way to journey this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fascinating approach to start wanting to take information onto a blockchain or into the blockchain of this space where people can control over their personal data. One of the questions I have for you, though, is especially where you guys are based and where you're trying to take this to begin with, are you finding any pushback at all from people regarding digitalizing their data in the first place? Because if already the system is a little bit behind in terms of its pen and paper approach, I wonder how much people might worry to get them, how much of a struggle might it be to get them over that first hurdle of accepting actually moving into the digitalized world is going to be better for the long run, but it might be scary short term as we start to upload your details onto computers.
Well, the benefit again goes back to, because you're handling the primary care, the asset, and you are the owner, so you don't really give the patients really a choice in this manner, because right. You're basically saying, look, if you come into a facility, this is how we're going to handle your data, this is how we're going to handle your information. Obviously, we're still compliant to what the rules and regulations are. right now, as we are also in talks with the local government bodies and bodies around the area as well, just not only in Malaysia, but around the region as well, in terms of how we can move forward. And I think everyone, in terms of like the government, wants to move forward. It's just not an easy undertaking. Like you said, when you give people sort of a choice, everyone will start asking like, oh, what is this? What is that? Is it safe? What do I do? And stuff like that. But if you make it a seamless experience to say, look, at the end of the day, like if we can move your data into a personal app for you down the road, if you're okay with that, we can still keep you in the traditional line. But if you want to move to that, I make it easy for you. You can check your data here. You can have all your reports directly to you. Are you okay with that? And what we've seen in the shift is that in our facilities that I would say 99% of people do not have an issue. The only people with an issue just wants to understand, like, okay, what is it? What difference does it make? Because if you think about it realistically, like, how many of us really think of, like, unless you're asked the question, how many of us actually like, hey, how's my health data actually stored, or even my personal data stored?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's a fair point. How many people ask? I think people perhaps are starting to ask that question more and more. But I understand the point in not necessarily giving people an option, simply transitioning to a smoother model, beneficial for everybody. Once they're there, they're going to realize the benefit. You've said healthcare is ripe for disruption. One of my basic questions was simply going to be how, but I also know that VCs, banks, they control a lot of what goes on, right? Especially in the large stakes that they have. I suspect in the background, there's a lot of things that they're making by ways of demands that don't really fit in with your current model. Is that part of the disruption you're looking at? And what kind of demands are you trying to move away from as you come into this space and allow for far lower barriers of entry?
I think the key thing is that the VCs and PEs are not necessarily going into this space to sort of like control the disruption and stuff like that. At the end of the day, PEs and VCs come from more of an angle of optimization of funds, basically, because at the end of the day, they are sort of, how do I put this? They're sort of a company that takes other people's money and invests into other people's businesses to make sure that they give a return to all the people who's investing to them. So their driven goal at the end of the day is to basically increase the earnings potential and their revenue for their investors. So they don't really care to a certain extent to what happens in the field. Obviously, there are more innovative VCs and PEs and stuff like that that will sort of try to push forward and like try to bring forward new innovations into the field. But I think the difference is that their top line of what they are working for and what I'm working for is very different, I would say, because right now I'm gearing towards innovation and disruption, but they have their own worries to do and to sort of like handle in a sense.
Right. I mean, you've created a project, so the answer to this is fairly obvious, but I'll ask it anyway. Where are you most excited about being disrupted? Is there any particular point that you really think the minute you start becoming particularly disruptive, things are going to get very exciting for you, for your business, and for your investors?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think the thing I'm most excited for is just the whole experience of digitizing healthcare. No one has sort of created an ecosystem where it's very easy for you to just handle all of your health data in that sense, because right now, if you really think about how you're going to access your health data, like for example, I'm like, okay, you have an x-ray like 6 months ago. Where are you going to get it, or how are you going to get it? It's you got it emailed to you, you got it as the hard copy, you got it in the file. Like, it's not centralized in your personal capacity. It's very scattered throughout what your handlings are in a sense. So what I'm super excited for is creating a system where it's very easy to sort of digitize all of your data in that sense into your fingertips, where you can sort of handle it, and you can basically cross-border this very easily with centralizing your personal data with your fingertips. This also means that now we are also opening up the whole healthcare field cross borders, because the moment information sort of gets controlled in a very systematic way, it's very easy to sort of work with each other in different countries, because now the issue is that you have many different countries who have many different systems in terms of healthcare and what information you need. But now when you sort of can streamline the process, it's very easy to bridge the gap. And I think what I'm excited for is a world where healthcare is not going to be inaccessible to everyone. I would say, because healthcare in this time and season is affordable to everyone to a certain extent with insurance and stuff like that, but it's not accessible in a way where, let's just say, if you need care, you can just fly somewhere or you can just go somewhere to sort of get the care you need. I always akin this to sort of, if, for example, I want to go buy something from the Netherlands, from Sweden, I can just go to a store. If I want meatballs, I can go to IKEA, just to experience the whole Swedish experience. But why can't I do the same with healthcare in that sense? Like, why can't I get the best of healthcare that each segment of the world gets to enjoy? So that's the bridge that I see happening down the road.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered the question in that way, because one of my other questions was going to be that sometimes healthcare come under, especially in certain countries like the US, come under scrutiny for really being too money driven, and there are a ton of people that really have to suffer day by day as a result of this. And I think the fact that you're working towards something that is going to make healthcare accessible um, really can mitigate against that. The idea that that might come up as an issue or a concern leveled at you guys as you kind of build this out, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think the key thing here is that at the end of the day, if your health data is yours at the end of the day, and a lot of people sort of think in that direction, whereby, okay, I'm just going to let the hostels and whoever deal with whatever you want to deal with and just let them handle it in that way. But the moment we create this process where it's very seamless and everyone can sort of handle their own thing, it's just easy to just move along and chuck the train along, I would say.
Right. An interesting question that's been asked is, I know you're looking at the region and not just a singular country. Is your system going to be geared towards allowing the personal data to be shared between institutions, countries, etc.? Is that a goal that you're looking towards as well? Where
Yes.
you don't have... Okay, great. How might that look?
So, like I said, the easiest manner is basically creating a HIPAA compliant, which is sort of like the US standard of healthcare data system, where it sort of compliance to the governmental body there to say, look, this is how we store your data. It's safe and it's secure. And if we can do that in a very easy manner in our own system, so this is where our healthcare app in our roadmap sort of comes down the line. If we can sort of move towards that direction by having adoption, then we can sort of push forward to other players and say, look, we have X amount of people using this system. Would you like to incorporate this system into your facility as well? And I think the whole industry as a whole, I wouldn't say healthcare as a whole, everyone doesn't like to be the first movers, because you don't know what is the effects of the first mover, and you don't want to take the risk of dealing with all the problems. So this is where our first movers advantage sort of comes to play, where as long as we can sort of build that base, it's very easy for us to move that narrative and say, hey, look, we have X amount of people, let's try it out together.
Right. Great. I've heard you use boring and not sexy in relation to the healthcare industry. And I kind of push back on that a tiny bit and think that a lot of people don't necessarily see it as boring or not sexy, but of course you know that there's millions, billions of dollars that run through the healthcare industry. It just feels unobtainable. And what's interesting about what you're doing, you're making it very obtainable for people, boots that are on the ground. The everyday person might not necessarily have tons of money to throw at it. I guess that was also a very large part of your thinking of coming into the Web3 space, was it?
Yeah, for sure. I guess you sort of nailed that.
Right. People are going to want to know, how is it that you guys are going to make the good money, the big money that's going to be able to pay them? We know pharma pays. We know niche offerings, scan surgeries, they also pay because there is a price tag that's put on them. Is there any aspect that you guys have identified this space that it perhaps is at a smaller value, but such a high volume that that's where you can also focus your attention. I don't know, be it digitizing your inventory management, for example, or whatever that might be. But is there something that you're looking at that is actually small scale that people don't think about, that's such high volume, and that's what you're excited about building out?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the key thing here is, like you said, volume. And a lot of people don't really see in terms of the whole healthcare industry is that, yeah, how the healthcare industry could be in the hundreds of billions, but a lot of people also tend to forget the wellness segment. It's more in the bigger billions in that sense, and globally I would say it could be even in the hundreds of billions, because you are more often healthy than you are sick, and you need supplements, you need wellness care more often than you are sick. So the moment you can start handling the primary care field, and you can start directing people there, and we can start handling that I would say the chain of patient flow, you start realizing, like, hey, look, the wellness segment at scale, at volume, is where the real money is at, to be honest. Because when we start handling like thousands of patient flow, you're looking at medication, you're looking at supplements, you're looking at more of the things outside of where their primary care is required. And because we are also looking into investing to those segments as well, at scale, your margins are, I would say, on a very healthy level.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. And to jump forward a second, and I'll come back. The KERC token and it being used to buy supplements, for example, I guess is where you're ultimately wanting to head towards. That then creates that real buy pressure on the token.
Yeah, definitely correct. I think one of the key differences that, in comparison to other projects where there's no real utilization of their tokens, this is where we see a real shift in dynamic. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we didn't want to go into NFTs and nodes is because we get asked this a lot, like, why don't you just do it in a bulk NFT and just make it easy for people to sort of like stake it and forget it? Because at the end of the day, that's what our project sort of is gearing towards. It's gonna give you great returns, but at a very boring pace. It's not going to be like the DeFi sexy, you're getting like 2-3% a day. Obviously, that's not sustainable. So why we went with a tokenized approach is that we see different utilities for our tokens down the road. Primary, in a sense of that, what we see is that you can transact with our token in quite in the short immediate term, because the systems are actually sort of there already. The Lightning network is there for people to use. It's quite simple to sort of plug it into your POS system and just run it off. That means you sort of don't need a Web3 wallet to sort of transact in that sense. You can even use your credit card to sort of pay in crypto. It's just how we go about that transaction. And this is where we are still figuring out with the institutional players. And I mean by that, it's more of the Web2 component, the guys, because they are the gatekeepers for the payment gateways and stuff like that. So how we bridge that is just where we are figuring that out. But at scale, you are able to sort of use the KERC tokens to pay for services. So this is where we see our price points not being, in a sense, too speculative, at the same time as too crazy in fluctuation. And I would say that's the key reason why we've decided to move towards a token rather than anything else.
Right, great, thank you. Scalability is something that you've talked about. You talked at length with your bonks. You talked about it in another Q&A that I heard. Can you just explain why the scalability of what you're doing is so important to being able to get the return you're getting? Why you having a foot in the door already? In fact, you don't just have a foot in the door; you're in the building and you've bought it, right? In that respect, what is it about that is really putting you in the strongest possible position to launch this in a very successful way?
I would say the like you said, I think it's on volume at the end of the day, because when you start doing everything in volume, it's very easy to push other segments. Like everything starts falling into place in a very domino effect at the end of the day. Because if you do it on a one scale, yes, it's great, but the growth factor and the scalability sort of gets cut. I think the simplest way to sort of explain this is that when you obviously multiply 2 times 1 versus multiply 2 times 4, you start seeing the explosion in growth very, very significantly. So that's why we sort of decided to move towards a fundraising model rather than sort of grow this ourselves, because we could do this on scale, but it would sort of take us years to sort of get there, rather than with an explosive growth and share the profits with everyone else instead.
Right. And of course, the more businesses that you buy, the better deals that you can get for any of the items that you need, any of the assets you bring in, or things that you need to provide them. You're going to continue to be able to negotiate better deals, and therefore that's where the real optimization comes, right? Outgoing cost starts to reduce, and therefore you're able to return far more.
Correct. That would be correct.
Now, I mean, I guess that's all part of this secret sauce. And again, you're not going to give it away too much, but you know, you're not going to be able to give me the precise numbers. But are these the kind of metrics that, again, you are approaching somebody and saying, look, I want to consider to buy your business from you. This is why we value it at this. You're thinking in the back of you've got the spreadsheets out to say, right, this is where we're going to be able to optimize, and we can get better deals for half the stuff that you're using here. Therefore, that's why we want to buy it.
In a way, yes. I'm trying to be, if you realize, I'm trying to be very careful without giving our secret sauce away, but in a way, yes. In that sense, we definitely do have a system that we sort of understand and work with, because we work very closely with the suppliers and the consumable providers. And at scale, obviously, it's really easy to sort of like get better deals overall and push our margins way higher.
Of course. And your investors are going to maybe ask, you guys have exclusivity deals with some of these providers. I assume you must in some areas, and therefore you guys are the only people perhaps for X amount of years that are going to get a certain price, so that no one can come and really compete with you, certainly in the short term.
Yes. In short, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You're obviously going to get perhaps names of people leveled at you that have said that they've got the next best thing, especially in the medical industry. And Theranos is a very famous example of that. What assurances are you giving, and how transparent are you wanting to be, so that that won't be leveled at you, but if it is, it's going to be an argument, conversation you're going to be able to squash and win within a very short amount.
I think the easiest way for us to do that is with our system securities that we have in place. And what that means is, at the end of the day, like, it's a business. I can't open up my books and I can't like do everything out in the open, because number one, obviously, to a certain level, that is illegal. You can't just put your books out in public, because we are not a public company as of this time moment. The difference is, what we are going to bring is that we're going to obviously invite community members that are invested in us, and we're going to fly them down, and we're going to let them tour all the facilities, and we're going to show them all the audited books and accounts. And obviously they do have to sign an NDA so that they cannot sort of disclose what they sort of seen, but they obviously can or cannot confirm what they've seen in a sense. So I would say that's the easiest way to sort of showcase what we are doing and what we have done. Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about a traditional business, you cannot really fake the books to a certain level, and as to a certain level, you can fake the books as well. But you will get caught at the end of the day. Like, there's only so much you can tweak the books, and like with Theranos as well, there's only so much she could fake her information, and when push come to shove in terms of what she needed to showcase, she couldn't do it. And I think the good security we have in place is that we're not trying to innovate the healthcare industry whereby we're revolutionizing how you can withdraw your blood. We're just saying, look, we're basically just trying to digitize and move the whole healthcare industry forward. It's not something that is I would say new and innovative where we're trying to make a whole new wheel. We're basically trying to give like the wheel suspensions, we're giving the wheel rubber tires. Like this is really simple things that the whole field lacks as a whole.
Right. So I asked the question earlier about what happens when your reputation precedes you and people start to wonder what's going on under your hood. And you're very clever to not give away your secret sauce. And if I'm getting close, I'm going to get the short answers, which I appreciate. I like the challenge. Is that a consideration that you have? Are you thinking that far ahead that you perhaps are approaching any acquisitions that you might be going through in a certain way to ensure that you can minimize that kind of problem occurring?
Yes, this is something definitely we have already thought about and we've really sort of planned for in scale, especially when I'm fully doxed in a sense. So like it's very easy. Like eventually, people in the industry will sort of catch wind. Like, hey, this guy has money and he's coming. So yes, we have thought about that, and yes, we have methods to sort of counteract that. I can't say it out loud in public because then they will know how to counter that.
Right. No, of course. I appreciate it, and I'm being cheeky by pressing on. I just think it's good for your investors to hear that you are thinking about that, and it is something that might well become an eventuality. And of course, it makes it harder because you're doxed, and because you're successful at the moment. I think it's great for them to hear that is something you are actually considering, and you're already putting things in place to avoid that happening in the future, which can obviously give investors real strength and knowledge to know that what you're building out is not just for the short term, you really have a long-term plan in your mind. Are you finding that there are any difficulties trying to connect real world business to Web3 in terms of pushback? Are you finding anywhere that you're meeting resistance? I know you said kind of, there are people in the healthcare industry who don't really want to change processes. But from either side, what difficulties are you finding, and how are you trying to perhaps navigate that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest pushback is we are first adopters. And everyone basically doesn't want to move into because if I'm going to change my system for you, or if I'm going to adopt your system, I want to make sure that it works. I want to make sure that it has some level of demand for it. I think that's the biggest pushback we have from either side at the end of the day. So if we do this at scale, this immediately is the track record that we sort of can show the other players to say, look, there is adoption, there is demand, and there is a use case for it. So this is sort of where we say, look, we need to do this at scale. We can't do this alone. We can't do this small and slow. We have to do this in an explosive way whereby we can move the market. So basically, we sort of need to have enough market share and patient share to sort of say, look, this is coming, and either you adopt it or not, because we are the first movers. So sadly, this is the way we have to go.
Right. I guess similarly, you're also saying to the people that might be listening now and thinking about investing, it's going to happen. Being an early adopter right now is going to get them the biggest rewards, especially when they're holding KERC. Can you talk us through, why you decided to take that approach and how that approach is going to work for the investor?
Yeah. So the difference is that a lot of other crypto projects out there will give you the rewards and the earnings straight off the bat. And the reason why we went with a very interesting approach whereby we are giving you a fixed 1.5% return on your investment and also a profit participation monthly. And right now, if you come in at a very, very early stage with our pre-sale, you get an airdrop bonus as well that will equate you, will bring you up to the airdrop bonuses will bring you up to nearly 300%. With the earnings you get a year, you're looking at maybe 350 plus in terms of your returns. So the reason is because we know, and based on our experience of handling healthcare assets, we can easily bring in about 6 to 12% on average monthly in terms of earnings. But the thing is that when you're talking about traditional and I would say, real businesses, to bring this up to scale immediately is very tough. Because number one, maybe the healthcare assets we acquire are not performing at that level of scale, or maybe there are issues, or maybe there are places for optimization before they get to that healthy level. Number two, it's more of the moment you sort of take them over, you don't know what skeletons are in their closet, you don't know the issues they face. They could have been cooking the books to a certain level where it makes it look nice, but at the end of the day, they're recording a lot of losses. So with this thought process in mind, we know we can sort of come to a very comfortable position about with everything included, because they are still, when we acquire these assets, they are still earning assets. That means these are businesses that have been running for years and years. These are not like new healthcare assets where they have no clients, they have no patient flow. So we know we can do an average, about a very safe average, about 3 to 5% a month in terms of earnings. So but we can scale it up. So this is where we sort of say, hey, look, how do we then get all our investors to a 6 to 12% eventually down the road? And so if you invest right now in the pre-sale, if you stick with us for 12 months, essentially you, by month 11, you'll be easily getting 6% on your 1.5% because of your holdings. So what that means is that your KERC holdings would have doubled and tripled by then. So basically it's 2 times 1.5 or 3 times 1.5. So that's how we sort of scale you to that level, because we need time to sort of get to that scalability factor. And this is how we're going to give you that jump start if you believe in this and if you come in this early.
Right. And when will the pre-sale run to?
So the pre-sale will run for 2 weeks as of this time moment, or if the hard cap gets hit first.
Okay. In terms of optimization and the assets that you acquire, do you have a minimum time period that you aim to work by, or sorry, a maximum time period that you aim to work by which you expect the minimum amount of optimization that you guys are satisfied with?
I would say there's not really a minimum time or a maximum time, because at the end of the day, definitely there's a lot of innovation and ripe changes to be made at any given moment. And as a business as well, you always want to grow. So there's always a space for optimization. As long as there's a demand for it, you can make changes.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so in terms of the KERC token, a question that's going to be thrown in your direction, and rightly so, is what incentive will there be for latecomers to join the party? Why only reward the people that are... I understand why you would want to reward people for trusting in your process and your idea, but why only reward those people with the highest returns and, have the latecomers feel like they really missed out?
I think the difference is that once we start scaling to that factor, this is a snowball rolling down the hill. Once we reach a terminal velocity, we can start acquiring with our own earnings. In that sense, we can start acquiring a scale massive healthcare assets ourselves. We don't really need that snowball factor. We're just more of giving our rewards out as a trust and innovation to scale the whole Web3's component. I think the key thing here is that because we are a very new project and we are bridging the whole healthcare and Web3 component, obviously it's very new. We don't really have a track record. So we are going to reward the earlier people for trusting us out in that sense. But as the later people who sort of come in down the road, you're essentially still looking at a fixed 18% APY a year. And to my experience as a businessman, that is a lot. Right. In terms of returns. It's not a small scale as well. So I wouldn't say they're losing out for sure in a sense, because once we start proving our track record and we start giving out the returns, I don't see any issues with the late adopters coming in and complaining. I guess it's just sad that you missed out and you didn't hear about this earlier.
That's fair enough. Yeah, the returns from a real world business perspective are obvious. I know I've asked in various iterations in terms of the question, but one of the biggest challenges people are facing, especially those that want to real world business to this space, is the low returns. And with a bear market marketplace, with the space kind of running at an all-time low in terms of traffic, and how many people, be it influencers or being in this space, listening to the conversation to find you. Are you ever tempted to maybe offer the same returns later down the line, when perhaps there is a position for more people to, find you, get eyeballs on, maybe a small window? Is that something that you're considering doing?
No, not at all. So the earlier bonuses will only be in this round. No, we are not going to give this bonus out to anyone after the hard launch, because I think our track record will speak for itself. A lot of people in this season are a bit fearful and a bit worried in terms of like, hey, look, it's a bear market, it's not doing well. Yeah, we all understand that, but at the same time, when you start looking at the data that SEX has put out, in the sense of the volume traded is still on a very high level at the end of the day. Like, there's still money being transacted. It's just that probably the speculation and the volume of money is still moving in Bitcoin. It's not moving in all the alts or all the other projects. So we do definitely believe there is the flow of cash in that sense there. And I think it's more about people trusting in the projects, because I think we've come to a point where the whole crypto field and the whole crypto industry is sort of come to a point where we're sort of sick of rugs, and everyone's really careful about projects that are going to fail. So I think people are only going to start choosing projects that will have a good track record, and I believe that is the best way to sort of market your project at this moment. So that's why we were only rewarding the very early adopters, and we believe our track record would be the best sort of marketing and sort of statement to say, hey, look, we're here, and this is who we are.
Right. I'm just had somebody complain that they can barely hear me. So is this a better sound for you? Can you hear me okay? Oh, hello.
Yeah, well, I can hear you, but I
you
don't
can
know
hear me
about the rest.
Okay. Okay. Well, as long as you can, that's the main thing, right? We can fix any other problems afterwards. Okay. So really, if anybody is interested in what you guys are doing and they want to get those extra bonuses, then they are going to have to jump into your Discord, have a look around, and I've put the link in. Tell me about the OTC, and are there any fears that not being on a DEX or a SEX is going to hold you back in terms of exposure?
Yeah, so I think the primary reason why we decided to go in for OTC is because we sort of didn't want swing traders on our tokens at the end of the day, because I think as early adopters in any project, and in any project that I've been in as well, the moment you open it up to speculation, there is a big issue with the whole pump and dump, basically. It's very easy for someone else to sort of come in and pump and dump your token. And the issue is that we sort of don't want to hurt our very early adopters with that, at the same time being able to reward them in a very sustainable place. So I won't say that we are not considering opening up to also being on a DEX or an LP, but this is definitely down the road. We are in talks with some of them. That much I can tell you, and we are sort of we're still cooking behind the scenes. But as of this time moment, at the pre-sale launch, an OTC system would be, I would say, the safest way to sort of help everyone stay sustainable in this time of moment, because we are still paying out on the token amount. The 1.5% is paid out on token amount, so that's why we're trying to sort of stabilize the price point at the earlier point.
Right, understood. So how is the OTC going to work if somebody wants to jump in and buy the token?
So the OTC is basically going to be a dynamic system whereby there's obviously buys and sells. You can obviously put in an order to say, hey, look, this is the amount I want to buy, and this is the price point I want to buy. So obviously it's a free market at the end of the day. We don't want to sort of bridge and gap everyone's sort of like, or gatekeep everyone's sort of like price point. So you're free to sort of like do what you want in the OTC and price it at the OTC. Obviously, the protocol and the project as well will be releasing some level of tokens every day, in a sense, to the OTC market. This is how we sort of akin ourselves to the bond pricing system, whereby we are sort of creating a floor pricing for everyone. And this is where we sort of also will call the reward amount, and it means basically what it means is that at the end of every month we would say, okay, look, this is the number that we're going to pay out the 1.5% and the profit to participation out on. So for example, if the OTC market moves towards maybe a $1.20 at the end of the month, we'll say, hey, look, this is the amount we're going to pay out the reward percentage in.
Okay, so it's very reaction.
Yes.
Great. You're also going to be giving reporting, and it's staggered reporting, which I liked. And I really like the explanation that you gave your bunks in terms of why you're going to be staggering your reporting. Can you kind of talk through a little bit to the people listening now as to why it is that you're going to be doing that?
Yeah, sure, for sure. So as in a traditional business, it's not easy to just tabulate a lot of data because there are too many moving parts, and it's very unfair for me to sort of just like give you numbers without getting everything ready. So what we need to do is obviously give our accountants and our internal team time to sort of tabulate the report, and this gives us time to then compile the report and give it to the community in that sense. So obviously working as a person who already has experience, this is where we can sort of benchmark and sort of work the timelines out, and this is why we've decided, okay, look, we're going to release the report on the 7th and we're going to release the funds on the 15th, because when you sort of tabulate all the data, we sort of give our team like sort of 3 days to sort of work those out. We give the weekends sort of as a buffer as well. That's why 7 days. Sort of like 5 working days to sort of a team to sort of hold that whole information out. And after that, obviously because we're traditional business, it takes time for us to on-ramp all those earnings into the whole crypto space. So that gives us a few days as well to sort of on-ramp that. That's why we're paying out on the following month.
Right, great. I like that approach. I think it's a smart approach, and I think it allows you to have all of your ducks in a row before you make an announcement. And I think that kind of pushes aside a lot of issues that a lot of protocols.
Yeah, definitely correct.
Have you tested the OTC? Is it something that's going through testing at the moment? Are you going to be putting it through testing? And then the question is going to be, are your contracts audited, and where are people going to be able to see those audits?
So our OTC is still being finalized and built behind the scenes. Snocky is still finalizing some cross T's and that, because if anyone who knows him, he's a guy, he's a wizard in terms of building and development. And what he likes is he likes the user experience at the end of the day to be smooth and simple at the end of the day. He's a person who basically the system has already sort of been structured, but the issue is that he wants the gas to be as low as possible for everyone. So you see, this is his thought process in a sense. He wants the user experience to be quick, and he wants the user experience to be clean at the end of the day. And this is where I really love working with him, because I guess we both really strive for perfection in this department. And as for the audits, we actually already have sent in, this is as much I can tell you, and I can release in this time. We actually already have sent in all our contracts and our stuff for audits. I like to keep this as a bullet down the road, so you'll be happy to know everything is going as smoothly as planned.
Nice. So a tiny bit of alpha there for anybody listening, right?
Yes.
Right. Are you looking around the space for partnerships? I know you've partnered with the hedge fund. Is there anybody else that you guys are looking at? Perhaps cross-chain. I know you guys are launching on Arbitrum, and my question is, guys, obviously going to be why Arbitrum? I think the answer is fairly self-explanatory, but I'd like to hear it in your words. But are you looking at partners? Are you looking at other projects that perhaps you think can bring value to what you're doing?
Yes, for sure. I think the core reason is because when we are handling healthcare assets and we're handling this level of funds at scale, there's always going to be a season where we are, I wouldn't say season's the wrong word because that's too long. There's going to be a small period where we are going to be sitting on a lot of liquid cash. And obviously, I don't like to just let cash just sit there. I'm a person who likes my money to work for me. I'm sure everyone as well does. That's why you're here. So this is where our partnership with DH sort of comes into play, because their systems allows us to get in and out really quickly with very minimal risk. So that means that we are able to sort of invest a small amount of the liquid cash we have into them, get a short return on that. So we're not looking at massive returns. So at least if my money is making me like maybe even 1% for that season, season again, I mean like the period. So I'm talking, when I think season, I'm thinking like 2-3 weeks. That cycle, if it makes me about 1-3% that cycle, I think that's a win for everyone, because that essentially allows me to push my profit participation up. And that means that we are definitely open to other projects as well. We are going to look into, we are already in talks with some other projects where we're saying, look, we're going to commit some of our treasury in terms of that liquid cash we have into your project in this time moment, so that we can also make those small gains. We're not looking at the crazy gains. I don't need 2-3% a day. I'm just looking like maybe a couple of percent just increase in that liquid cash holding. So yes, as the coming weeks come, you will definitely see more of our partnership announced. It's being worked in the backgrounds, and you can be assured that that's going to happen. And to answer that component of why arbitrum, definitely because I would say it's the up and coming chain that we see, me and Snockify really see it growing, because it's basically just a mirror of ETH. And we both love how the ETH chain works. We don't essentially like how the gas system works there, but we like how the back-end coding and how developed it is in that sense. So it made sense for us to be on ETH rather than on BSC or any other chain in this time moment.
Right. I was impressed hearing you speak, and I'm also impressed speaking to you now directly, because you're very dialed into the conversation, and nothing much is getting past you, and you're not really falling for traps, which is making my life particularly hard. But it again is something that the investors should be taking on board and taking note of, because that's the kind of person they really want sitting at the helm of a project like this. It's someone who really thinks about the responses and is also listening and dialed in enough to hear everything and be able to react accordingly. I think there's a real strength there. With that in mind, and with how dialed in you are there any holes in what you're doing that you have identified that you are desperate to plug?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the compliment. You're asking some really good questions as well. In a sense of like really trying to push the narrative to squeeze some juicy things out of me.
Yes,
for sure. So I think the biggest pitfalls of the project and the problems that we see coming in, I wouldn't say we have all the answers to all of our problems, because realistically, no one is going to always be able to fix everything at one given moment. So I would say the major issue we have now would be to acquire the healthcare assets fast enough. So this is going to be a major issue, because realistically, when you talk about the whole M&A process, it's still a very traditional process. For us to acquire healthcare assets, obviously we want to acquire the best healthcare assets for our investors. We are not going to obviously go out and say, hey, look, you're selling, okay, I'll just buy you over. We want to make sure we get the best deals, because that essentially means the best returns for everyone. And that process takes time. The whole legal traditional process as well takes time. The whole lawyers and signings of papers take time. We also need to consider the factor that the other side also, the moment we give a counter offer, it will take time for them to sort of like get to a point where like, okay, I'm comfortable with doing this deal. So that's where I would say our biggest pain points are going to be in terms of acquiring the assets at a very sustainable pace. So this is why initially our whole target is to maybe do about 8 to 10 million in terms of raises. But we know we need to stagger that raise, because we don't want to be sitting on a big load of cash at any given moment and pay out rewards that doesn't have any yield. So what that means is that if I'm sitting on the cash and if I'm paying the rewards out on the cash I'm sitting on, that's basically Ponzonomics. So what we've identified is that we have already sort of talked to a large, substantial amount of primary care assets, and we've already started the whole negotiation process. So this is not something whereby we are going in and saying, look, the moment you invest in us, we're going to take like a couple of months before we kick off. We are like, I'm gearing and ready behind the scenes to sort of get this all kicked off. So I'm already sitting on sort of like letters of intents to buy them out at a certain price points, and before we move into the next stage. So we've already sent out a couple of them, and we're sort of sitting on them at this time and moment before the pre-sale to acquire them. So what how we've sort of solved this problem is that we have identified a level where we sort of need to push returns to. Mm-hmm. So we have already sort of scaled that conversation with all these primary care asset holders to this point. So this is sort of like our counteract to that issue, but obviously there are a lot of issues that we cannot control at the same time, like I said before, whereby the negotiation process will still take time. So this is why we give the 1.5% and the profit participation. So obviously in the earlier months, you're not going to get the highest of profit participation. This is where the airdrop bonus sort of helps supplements that.
Right. And obviously being aware that you can only deploy, as I've heard you say in another AMA, you can only deploy a certain amount of money at any given time is also key, right? And that's really what plays into you wanting to avoid any form of Ponzi.
That will be correct.
Right. Is there anything I haven't covered? I've got a couple more questions that I'll ask, but is there anything that you wish I had covered but didn't?
I think we went quite comprehensive in the scale of everything at this time of moment. I can't think of anything.
You didn't want to give me that secret sauce recipe?
No.
Do you have any private pledges for the KERC token pre-sale as it currently stands? Has anybody approached you that perhaps wants to give a significant amount of money to you? Because I know, the rumblings are that people are very impressed with yourself. They're very impressed with the business model and what you guys have going on. I think it might be exciting for people to hear if in the background there are conversations happening where people perhaps pledged some money towards you.
Yes, for sure. We do. I wouldn't say the amount. I would say it's quite a substantial amount. I wouldn't say the amount because obviously I don't like to count my eggs before the hatch, and I like to be honest with everyone. So there are pledges behind the scenes being happening and being done. But I wouldn't say it out loud because I think that's fair. Until the money comes through, we won't announce it. But when it does, everyone will be the first to know.
Right. Great. Okay, I've only got a couple more questions. When Lambulance, and that's a Lambo ambulance.
Well, we were thinking of like little quirky things, like we were talking with the community members and stuff like that. I'll be honest, we have even entertained those ideas, like those fun ideas down the road. Obviously nothing absurd, but I'm thinking more on the line of maybe down the road we might even name the clinic after one of our investors in that sense, and I think that would be something fun.
Right. Are you ever going to consider maybe giving someone a free health screening? Is that something that you're ever considering? Come fly out, test our services. You've won this as part of a package, perhaps to people that might not necessarily be able to afford it, and it could really benefit.
Yeah, for sure. These are things that we definitely have down the pipeline on top of our community giveaways. So obviously the first incentive, like we said earlier, was that we'll fly down about 6, I think what a good number for us was 6 people every year. That's what we're targeting now. We'll do 2 times this year because obviously for the hard sale, we want to be able to show the people coming into the hard sale that, look, we are doing what we really say we're doing at the pre-sale. This is not something that it's fake. There's no, we're not hiding behind any hook wings or stuff like that. So that's why we're doing it twice this year. But we want to try and do it once every year at least, whereby we'll pay for your flights and hotels, and we'll basically hold a raffle whereby we'll fly about 6 people down to Southeast Asia to see everything that we have, to see under our books, to see what we're doing.
Right. One other question has just popped up before I ask my last one. You said in Canada, you're obviously in Malaysia. There's, I assume, a difference between the buying and selling culture of the both countries, right? And you must get a really interesting overview of how they both work. Do you think that's one of the main strengths that you're able to put to this, is that you understand the differences between the two? And it really gives you the ability to kind of think about scoping outside of just your region and perhaps more towards what might be considered traditional Western countries?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the strengths is that we garner at a very early stage is that we have worked in both the west side and also the east side. What that means also is that obviously we explored a little bit into the whole European healthcare segment as well. But that whole universal healthcare system is a bit tough to crack because it's a very different journey there for them. But definitely we have experience with handling the healthcare region in multiple continents. So that's what I would say one of our great strengths, to understand the whole healthcare field and where we see adoption being right.
Right. I'm just looking at some of the questions, and somebody's kind of asked a question that people are laughing at, but actually it raises a very interesting question. If somebody does hold your token and unfortunately they do pass away, are there anything that you guys are going to put in place, bearing in mind you have that data, you might know that they hold the token, that gives those tokens to a next of kin? Or is that going to be treated very much like a traditional kind of Web3, not your keys, not your crypto?
I think the easiest way is that I think the easiest way any project can sort of handle that. Like, I think what we are willing to is that if that person passes away, you can sort of contact us, and obviously we have to take it case by case basis, whereby we're saying, look, are you really the owner of this wallet? Then we can explore what we can do, because obviously it won't be fair to sort of do this for everyone, and this will open a whole new can of worms whereby everyone will start saying, hey, look, I own this wallet because it's the biggest wallet. And that could be crap. So obviously we're going to take this case by case basis. I wouldn't say we have a system for that yet at this time moment, but it's definitely something that I've thought about before with other projects as well. So what I can safely say is that we can definitely, like, it's not too tough of a thing to entertain the issue, but obviously you gotta sort of like come to us with a very, 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 very large, substantial amount of proof, and then we will sort of explore how we're going to do this.
Right. Fair enough. We're starting the giveaways now. Just so everybody knows, they've got to jump into your Discord if they want to be eligible. So I'm going to ping the Discord link one last time now. In the meantime, outside of the usual answers, is there anything in particular that you are most looking forward to down the road with this project? Is there anything on your roadmap, or something that isn't on your roadmap but is in the back of your mind that you're working towards, that is going to be your moment to be able to sit down, take a little bit of stock, congratulate yourself, and say, I've got to this point?
I think I would say in this time and moment, not yet. Nothing that we've released yet. There are definitely things down the pipeline that we are working on. It's safe to say we have quite a number of things we're working on behind the pipelines. In the coming weeks, as we ramp up towards our pre-sale, I'll definitely release more things, because I don't like to release things out until we are ready and we can safely say that we have sort of crossed all the checkboxes in terms of the problems that can arise and the benefits that will come from that. So I think anyone who sort of works with me or sort of like have a conversation with me know that I don't like to do things unless I'm very certain that we can do it, because at the end of the day, like, I think there's just too much speculation in the crypto space. So I like to make sure that everything is sustainable. and as to answer your question in true honesty, I wouldn't say in any of the short term at this time, I wouldn't say there's any moment that I would stop and say, yeah, I've done it, because I don't think I can ever stop working a day in my life. Like, I enjoy this. I enjoy building things. I enjoy working.
Right. Good. I mean, that's a great answer. I think a lot of people like to hear that answer. It's people who are creating really good things, commonly they say the exact same thing, is they enjoy the grind, and therefore there might be little celebrations along the way, but you're never going to be fully satisfied. And that's what sets people that really build interesting things apart from those that don't, right? That constant hunger to grow. John, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming in and waking up so early to speak to us. Is there any last things that you want to say to the audience before we kind of wind this down?
So definitely there are more things coming along the way in the coming weeks. Join our Discord. If you don't have your questions answered now, and if you really want an answer, join our Discord and just ask away, and we'll be happy to sort of tackle them, and I'll be happy to sort of answer them. I wouldn't shy away from any questions. Ask me those hard-hitting questions. Go ahead. I have nothing to hide, and I have nothing to sort of hide behind. I'm fully doxxed. So yeah, and you've been a great AMA interview as well. Like, you've asked really good questions.
That's very kind. Thank you so much. It's like I said, I really looked forward to the challenge of this conversation because it's forced me to deep dive into an area that is outside of my expertise, and that has forced me to kind of find different angles to ask questions. But you've been very transparent, except for the secret sauce. But I think if anybody really listens and kind of listens to what's happening and reads between the lines, they can hear where there is massive value in what you're doing. Obviously, I'm not going to give all of the finer details on it, but it's a very clever model if I understand it right, and I think it could be wildly successful.
Yeah, thank you as well.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll wind it down now, and I look forward to having you back again at some point. Once you're in full launch and everything's ticking over, so that we can perhaps catch up and find out how things are going.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to come back as well.
All right. Perfect, John. You have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.